Hi everyone, and welcome to Gwyn Collects. I feel like it's been a while since I filmed just like a sit-down, more educational video on my channel, and I know those get a really good response when I do film more just kind of like collecting tips videos. So I thought for today I would record a How Gwyn Collects video. So I know in the figure collecting community, a lot of people always talk about their rules or kind of like things they follow when collecting figures. And I know pretty much every hardcore collector sets some kind of rules on their collection so that they don't go overboard. Because in this hobby, it's quite easy to go overboard, let's just say that. So I think at this point, about 10 or 11 months into collecting, I kind of have a vague idea of what my rules are and which rules I've broken, and kind of the process flow for how I decide which figures to pre-order or buy to add to my collection. So, long intro aside, in this video I'm going to be giving my 5 main criteria in the order of importance for how I decide which figures to buy. And again, this is just how I decide, but I feel like it's a pretty good way to start if you're just getting into the hobby and you're wondering, like, how do I even begin to choose which of the amazing figures getting released I'm gonna order? Because if only we all were millionaires and could order every figure we wanted. That would be wonderful. So without further ado, let's get into my 5 criteria. So the first criteria I use when deciding on which figures to buy is a pretty straightforward piece of criteria, and it is, do I like the figure? So I know a lot of people have different rules that kind of go within this piece of criteria. So when I first started collecting, one of the rules I had was no characters that I don't know and no original characters. So that was kind of my, if I liked a figure but I didn't know the character, I wouldn't buy it. And while that's a great rule, I highly dislike it now, because I've missed out on quite a few figures that I really, really wish I would have pre-ordered or bought in the past because of this silly rule. Original characters, in my opinion, make some of the nicest figures out there, and I think like just swearing them off because you don't know the character can mean you miss out on some really amazing figures from amazing artists. I don't know. Personally, I have completely dropped that rule. For me now, with figure collecting, it's more so, do I like the figure itself? If I dislike a character, I probably won't get a figure of them. But whether or not I like the character, like if I've watched the anime and like them, or if I haven't, that is a little bit less relevant to me now, especially with figures like SkyTube figures, where basically all of their figures are original characters, and I love them. So I would say it can be a great rule to have if you really want to guide your collection that way, but I beg you, just consider OCs, please. Just consider them, because I promise you, original characters open up a whole new world in figure collecting. The second piece of criteria I have for my figure collection that I look at after I see the figure and become mesmerized is which company is manufacturing the figure or did manufacture the figure. So this kind of splits off into 2 groups. If it's a pre-order that I'm considering, where we don't know what the final product is going to look like, there are a few companies that I will pre-order as long as I like the figure and it fits all my other criteria. So those companies are Alter, Kotobukiya, Good Smile Company, My Ethos, SkyTube, Max Factory. I think that's all of them, actually. I think those are all the main ones. So if the figure falls in one of those companies, I know the final product is going to turn out great. I'm not concerned about that, so I'll be much more likely to pre-order. If the figure has already been released, then my advice is to hop on over to My Figure Collection, which is a figure collecting website that has like a huge database of like every figure released. It's such a great website. Such a great source of information as well. And go on there and search up the figure that you want and see what the user photos look like, because people will upload photos of the figure when they get it to kind of show everyone what it looks like compared to the prototype. So if you go on there and you see the figure and it looks like the prototype and you're happy with how it looks in the photos from the users, buy it. In my opinion, company in that case doesn't matter. As long as they delivered on their prototype, then I think it's fine to just go for it and buy a figure. And if the final product looks kind of trash compared to the prototype, you know, maybe it's not best to get that figure. There's only one company that I think is like a major red flag company to really watch out for, and that is Fots, Beefle, Pultra, I think, is also under that umbrella. Like, it's like a one company that makes all of these figures from under different names. Avoid Fots like the plague. Just avoid it. I know their prototypes look good, but it won't end up like that. And even if it does, you'll get it in like 10 pieces instead of one. If you would like to hear my thoughts in a bit more detail on the different figure companies, I actually have 2 videos up on my channel. I will link them above, where I discuss the best and worst figure manufacturing companies. The first video is pretty old on my channel. I think the second video is a much better resource, and in the second video I actually have like photos and everything of figures from the different companies, so I'd highly recommend checking those 2 out if you want to know how I feel about a pretty wide variety of companies. Now, once I've decided that I like a figure and that the figure company making it is one I trust for the most part, then I will consider this third point. And I'm sure this is probably one of the most important points to some people. I definitely see why, and that is price. So my kind of hard cap on a pre-order is probably around 300 Canadian dollars. I would maybe break that, but that's pretty on the high end for me. So price is definitely something I highly consider when I'm buying anime figures, because we all have budgets here. So I would say if the company is one that I know will really deliver, say like Alter or Good Smile Company, I don't mind paying a little bit more for a figure. But if the company is a company like Union Creative or maybe Wing, I'm not quite willing to break that 20,000 yen mark, or about 220 Canadian dollars. Even then, it's a little bit steep. There are some nice Union Creative figures, but they can be kind of iffy. So depending on the company, I will be willing to pay a little bit more. But yeah, I typically don't really like my figures to break. Like for a 1/7, I don't like it when they break 20,000 yen. That's like a really overpriced 1/7 in my opinion. For 1/4, I'm willing to go to about 30,000 yen. But yeah, it kind of ranges. SkyTube, I'm willing to pay a little bit more because I know their quality is insane, and I already know that you're kind of paying a premium for SkyTube figures. So depending on the company, if I really, really like that company and I know they're going to deliver a good product, I will be willing to pay a little bit more. But I think it's always important to know kind of what your limits are with price. And it's okay if a figure breaks it every now and then, but you shouldn't repeatedly be breaking your price limits. The 4th criteria is one that weighs pretty heavily on my decisions, actually. I know I said this was in order, but this one does actually kind of impact it quite a bit as well, and that is release month. So if the figure is already out, then I already know what I'm paying in the month, essentially. So I can decide if it's in my budget to buy a figure in any said month. But if I am pre-ordering something, I do look at the month that that figure comes out, and I decide whether or not I could afford it that month. I know figures get delayed, but it's not like you can predict delays, so you just kind of have to hope for the best when it comes to that, I think. But I set a limit, and I'd really recommend setting a limit for yourself per month. I set it to about 500 Canadian dollars. I don't hit that most months. So don't worry, I'm not spending that much every month, but that's kind of my limit. So if I have pre-orders and they kind of total to around 500 Canadian dollars, that's when I kind of start to go, maybe we need to cut down on my pre-orders for the month. Some months are going to be more expensive than others just because there's multiple figures that I I just refuse to not buy all coming out in one month, but it's kind of, you know. For example, in January of 2022, we have the Kaguya Bunny. Obviously I'm gonna buy it. We have the Taiga Bunny. Again, obviously gonna buy it. And then they recently just announced the Erina Bare-Legged Bunny. And I want this bunny. I did want the tights one, but I'm not willing to pay aftermarket price, so bare-legged it is. It also comes out in January, and I have some other figures in January, and I just cannot do 3 bunny figures in January. Like, that is just, I cannot. I refuse to spend that much in one month. So I'm probably gonna sacrifice the bare-legged Erina bunny just because it's just out of my price range, and sometimes you have to make sacrifices in this hobby. So that is an example of me kind of using a month to decide whether or not to buy a figure, even if I do want that figure. Hey everyone, Editing Gwen here. Watching my video back, I realized there was one thing I wanted to talk about that I didn't when it comes to budgeting and like monthly orders. One tip I have for you guys if you are kind of like just overwhelmed in a specific month with pre-orders, one thing that I do sometimes is I'll go and I'll look at like US sites and like Canadian sites, and if you're in like the UK, there's like, or in Europe, there's like tons of different Europe sites, European sites. I feel like I said that weird. There will be like region exclusive websites that sell anime figures often, and as long as they're legit, which you can check, just like go on My Figure Collection, Reddit, you can figure out if they're legit. I always check the local stores and the stores in the US because they get their shipments like 2 to 3 months after Japan. So if you're like reeling because your January, like mine, is just horrible, definitely check the like local shops around you to see if any are getting that figure. Usually I find it's a little bit more expensive to buy locally than to buy straight from Japan, but it's different for everyone, and if you'd rather just push it off a little further or pay at the time of order, because I know a lot of Japanese sites you have to wait till it comes out to pay, but on a lot of US sites you can just pay right up front for figures, so definitely keep that in mind. If you're overwhelmed in a month, try and check some different shops to see if they have different release dates. And with that, I am going to make a part 2 to this video. Watching it back now, I'm like, there's so much more I want to talk about. So I'm going to make a part 2 about like how I decide where to buy my figures once I've decided which figures I want to buy. Because I feel like that, like, this video kind of segues into that. Anyway, I'm just yapping here. Let's get back to the much nicer looking Gwen. And the 5th piece of criteria that I think it almost cycles back around to 1 and actually sometimes comes before 1, but it is looking at your collection and deciding if a figure you want to pre-order fits. To me, if I really love a figure, steps 1 through 4 apply before step 5. If I really want that figure, I will find a spot in my collection for that figure. And to be honest, up till this point, I kind of just collect willy-nilly. Like, I just buy what I like. And I actually think my collection looks fairly cohesive and cool, regardless of the fact that I just buy what I want. But I think it's really important to almost have a vision for your collection, and it will really reduce the amount of like regrets you have, I think, in the future. Like, I started out not really with a vision, but I knew what I wanted when I started. Like, I saw figures and I was like, oh, I know which shelf that'll go on, I know what it'll look like, I'm excited about that figure. And to date, I don't regret a single figure purchase that I've made. So I would say having a vision for your collection and knowing kind of what types of figures you like is really, really important. I'll often have like theme shelf ideas. So either it'll be like a series. So I'm planning on having a Attack on Titan shelf, for instance. I'd really like a Jujutsu Kaisen shelf. So like you can go by show for a shelf, a Kaguya-sama shelf, obviously. Or you can kind of go by theme. So I've pre-ordered a few figures recently that are more like streetwear. or like in bikinis, for instance. So I already have Hurdle Girl. If you've watched my Hurdle Girl video, you can watch it above. I also pre-ordered another Kekematsu figure, and I also think that Lufia would look really, really killer on that shelf because she's also wearing a bikini. So it's kind of like a bathing suit vibe shelf, and I can see the composition in my head with one figure sitting, one figure standing, and Lufia laying in the front. So I think it's really nice if you have kind of like a vision in your mind of what you want your shelf to look like before you purchase a figure. And then when you get that figure and you can add it to your shelf, it's just like beautiful. So I think knowing what will fit in your collection and what will look weird definitely can also help you decide and weed out figures that you want to buy. So I hope this video was helpful and it gave you guys a little bit of insight. I get a lot of questions about why and what I decide to pre-order and buy, so hopefully this helps. I would love to hear your guys' criteria. So what are the main things that help you decide what figures to buy? Because I know everyone kind of has different rules. I'd also like to know if you guys regret any of your rules, like how I regret my no OC rule. Because I've talked to a lot of like figure collectors that have been collecting for a few years, and I know they all have at least a few regrets of figures that they passed up on previous that they feel that they really shouldn't have. So I'd love to hear about how you guys collect. So please leave that in the comments down below, and I can't wait to read about how all of you guys decide which figures to add to your collections. So that's all for today. I hope you all have a very wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!